Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Bridget Jones's Baby, starring Renee Zellweger, Colin Firth, Patrick Dempsey, Jim Broadbent, Gemma Jones, and Emma Thompson, directed by Sharon Maguire. Welcome back to the series, Miss Maguire. Now, before I get into this movie, I have seen it when it came out in theaters back in 2005, no, 2015, 2016, and around there. And what took them so long after The Edge of Reason? But but did we need it after that ending? That's for the show to decide. So let's just get straight into the movie. We open with a 43-year-old Bridget Jones, returned by Renee Zellweger after a plastic surgery, as she's single again while celebrating her birthday. And I thought, what the fuck happened between her and Mark, returned by Colin Firth, as she sings and dances to Jump Around, which doesn't feel romantic at all as far as romantic comedies are concerned, nor is it funny. But I do like the song Jump Around, as I always get entertained when it pops up in the movies. Until we move on to 12 hours earlier, Bridget gets a call from her mother, returned by Gemma Jones FaceTiming her, and her father, returned by Jim Broadbent. And she gets up for the day Daniel Cleaver's funeral comes, and is he dead? Is he dead? As I'm calling bullshit at this point. And I'll get to why until the end of the movie, but she's there with Jude and other Bridget's friends as Mark gets there with his girlfriend Camilla, while Bridget is desperate to cause a scene and makes one at the funeral, as well as bumps into Mark, and Camilla and Bridget is still working for television. And this movie feels desperate to make me laugh, but unfortunately it fails, as it doesn't make me laugh, and I would rather watch Knocked Up than this movie, in my opinion. And I recommended Knocked Up, I'll say, solidly. Whereas here, we'll get there. But Bridget gets to filming an interview with Miranda and George Wilkins, as Bridget humiliates herself by making Miranda saying things while someone calls her while at work, and her boss, Richard Finch, chats with them about how the CEO, Alice, is here, and tells them to behave themselves. And Bridget is told by her friends they can't be there for Bridget for her birthday, as Jude has a baby of her own, but she goes out with Miranda and meets Tom, and he blows her off. And we get back to the opening scene, and she makes a birthday resolution while Bridget and Miranda go out at a glamping festival that feels erotic, but as Bridget falls into mud and meets an American named Jack, played by Patrick Dempsey, who helps her up, and the shots are once again not great, and these characters are not as bad as before, but I don't like them in this movie either. They almost get a photograph with Ed Sheeran, as they believe he works at a Starbucks, as he performs on stage and goes on the wrong tent and sees Jack while Miranda looks for Bridget in a plastic bubble ball with Ed Sheeran. And as Bridget has sexual intercourse with Jack, and wakes up and walks out of the tent and gets her tent stuck in the mud. And Bridget gets back and meets Shaza and calls Jude, and she says Mark is going to be the godfather while Bridget is the godmother. And when Bridget arrives at the church, and Jude's little girl says, "Where the fuck were you in a church?" which she could be cursed for that, by the way. And the day gets more awkward, and Bridget and Mark dance while Gangnam Style is playing in the background. And this movie is like the last movie, awkwardly bad. Bridget learns Mark and Camilla are getting divorced. I guess they were married, which I didn't recall that at the time, but the movie does a bad job at telling the story, as it is a Bridget as Bridget is falling for Mark, like she fell for Daniel last time, and she gets fooled as they have sexual intercourse. And next morning comes, and Bridget writes a letter to Mark, and she says there was a list on why they got divorced in the first place, and she tries to put on some pants, and excuse me, people think she's getting fat, which, while she learns with Miranda she's pregnant. But the question is, who's the father of the kid? Mark, whom she's known as a kid and was married to her once as Jack, whom she met at the festival. And Bridget meets Dr. Rawlings, played by Emma Thompson, who's one of the writers of the screenplay. And this script is dumb like any fucking romantic comedy, for damn sure. Miranda finds Jack on a dating website he invented called Quantified Love, Quantify Love, excuse me, and tells Bridget he's a millionaire, and they get to him on the show as the makeup artist Kathy almost puts on no makeup on Jack as he gets on the show, and with Miranda as she makes it fucking awkward as Jack sees Bridget in the stage management, and he recognizes her from earlier in the movie as they did each other at the festival earlier in the film, and eventually he goes up to Bridget and has a brief conversation until she says to Jack she's pregnant and believes it might be his, and the performance by Renee Zellweger is terrible like last time. Dr. Rawlings shows the images of Bridget's baby and promises she'll do her best to take care of the baby. And Dr. Rawlings almost puts a needle inside Bridget's privates. Please don't make me say the word, it's not one of my favorite words. As she tells her father, as well as Mark, after he goes through a court session about protesting, they're happy about it, while Mark handles it well as he asks if she's happy about it, and she believes it's his baby. And Bridget decides to whether or not figure it out who's the real father, as Jack comes by her apartment and gives her some healthy food to eat. And their chemistry is not as good as Bridget and Mark's in the first movie, as their chemistry is gone when the second movie happened. And after that, they got fucking divorced. What can I say? Alice gets on Bridget's case, and afterhand, she vomits as Mark wants to name the baby Jack, and goes to Dr. Rawlings with both Mark and Jack, while Bridget talks about the app about the hard news, and they're live in the background with some men showing their asses on the TV, and tries to turn it off, and people laugh at the presentation, while Bridget sees Jack and Mark in the same room, and she brings in the area data manager, while Alice tries to talk with Bridget, and she wants to go someplace quieter at an Italian restaurant that Mark and Bridget usually go to, and this could never not get any more awkward, while Bridget explains she doesn't know who the father really is. And I can't believe 12 years later, after making the last movie, that they make this story as not as worse as last time, in my opinion. Bridget's mother finds out Bridget's baby while her mother is running a campaign election for high office. And Jack goes to Bridget to a class of exercises for the baby, and Mark decides to join along. And the writing in this is terrible. And what was Emma Thompson thinking of writing this awkward romantic comedy that's R-rated, as Mark doesn't answer the phone, but Jack does, as Bridget had some problems with the baby, as Mark is upset that Jack was there, but not him, as this isn't a competition, as Mark and Jack have a conversation about the differences between each other, and he confesses he wasn't dressed for the occasion when he and Bridget had sexual intercourse. And honestly, I had no idea what the fuck he was talking about, nor do I care, as I'm no expert in this situation, as I've never went through this, nor will I ever do so. Bridget calls Mark, and he ignores her, as she sees him on the TV finishing the case with the protesters, and they took off their shirts, which is inappropriate, and Jack says he wants to move in, and Bridget, as she asks what if the baby belongs to Mark, and he says that'll change things, as she confesses she's in love with Mark, and Jack confesses he lied to Mark as he wanted Bridget for himself, and realizes she loves Mark because he feels like home, and she leaves her flat. If you don't know what that means, it means her apartment in England, and walks to Mark's house and sees Camilla is there, and she believes they're back together, when it'll be explained at the end he was just taking her to the airport. And Bridget sees Dr. Rawlings, and we move on to 4 weeks until the baby comes out, and it's Christmas time. And Bridget's mother is inspired to help single mothers and gay people out there, and I wasn't buying that turnaround, nor was I buying this movie in general. Alice finds General Liu Tong in the lobby while she interviews a different man, as Richard defends Bridget as Alice wants to fire her, but Bridget quits the television business and gets everyone else to leave the building, as Bridget doesn't know what the fuck she's done. And this movie is 2 hours and 3 minutes, and honestly, it feels 20 minutes long. Too long, I'll say. As some of this can be in the editing room floor, while Bridget can't remember her code for the bank and leaves her bags inside the bank building while it's raining outside, and she goes outside of her building as her keys were in the bags in the bank that she let them in, excuse me. And Mark walks by Bridget's flat and he warms her up and he breaks through the door and lets Bridget up, and Mark's pants are wet and Bridget's water breaks, and they call Gianni for help to get Bridget to the hospital and making inconvenient deliveries. And this is so far an unnecessary sequel like last time. They bump into protesters march full of women as Gianni calls Jack and Mark carrying Bridget to the hospital while Jack comes into the rescue, as Mark is tired and helps Jack out getting Bridget to the hospital as Dr. Rawlings comes into the rescue. And at one point, Bridget is in pain and she sucker punches Jack in the nose and bites Mark in the hand as he says he'll love the baby. Mark says he'll love the baby as it is, and if it doesn't belong to him. And they involve her job on the television. Bridget's parents and Bridget's friends, including June, and eventually the baby came out, and it's a beautiful baby boy. And it's a happy moment of the film, which I'll give it that. Mark and Jack test the DNA to see who the baby belongs to, and we get to 1 year later at Bridget and Mark's wedding, as we learn Jack is there and the boy belongs to Mark. And we see in the newspaper Daniel is alive, as this climax was bullshit. It was a bullshit way to let the audience know there was another movie coming. And hopefully they won't fight like they did in the first two movies. And hopefully it won't be as bad as this movie and the last movie. But how bad was this movie? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 3.8 out of 10. This is awkwardly bad like the last movie, and it belongs on that level as the characters are unlikable like the last time as well. And honestly, I'd rather watch Knocked Up than this pile of shit. And the script is dumb, like any fucking romantic comedy, as well as an R-rated raunchy humor bullshit movie that comes around, as those aren't my favorite kinds of movies in general. The movie is awkward for damn sure, as the performance by Renee Zellweger is getting more terrible in this movie like the last time, and the chemistry between Bridget and Jack wasn't as good as Bridget and Mark in the first movie, and honestly, their chemistry is gone when the second movie happened. And the writing in this is terrible, as Emma Thompson wrote and acted in this movie with someone else. Well, someone else didn't act in this movie like she did, and I don't know what she was thinking of writing this awkward romantic comedy that's R-rated. This isn't as funny nor romantic, as I wasn't buying the material, as this is 2 hours and 3 minutes long, as it's 20 minutes too long, and some of this could be in the editing room floor, and this is a non-recommendation for this movie. And the fact that the climax told me Daniel was alive was a bullshit way to set up a sequel, and this is an unnecessary sequel like the last time. But hopefully the next one won't be as bad as this one and the last film. But I don't know, I'm getting my hopes up too high. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me. Next time I will be back with Bridget Jones, The Mad About the Boy. And until then, part 3 of Bridget Jones's Diary.